Every prophet in the Bible and how they died. Prophet 1. Isaiah, the greatest prophet in the Old Testament. He wrote some of the most famous prophecies in the entire Bible, including the coming of Jesus, 700 years before Jesus was born. Isaiah served under 4 different kings of Judah. Then came King Manasseh, one of the most evil kings in Israel's history. Manasseh didn't want to hear God's warnings. When Isaiah rebuked him, Manasseh ordered him executed. But not a quick death. According to ancient accounts recorded in the lives of the prophets, Isaiah hid inside a hollow cedar tree. They found him, and they sawed through the tree, and through Isaiah, with a wooden saw, from top to bottom. He was sawed completely in half. Hebrews 11:37 references this with the words, "They were sawn in two." The most quoted prophet in the New Testament died in a tree, cut in half by a king he refused to stop warning. Prophet 2, Jeremiah. He is called the weeping prophet because his entire ministry was delivering messages nobody wanted to hear. He warned Israel for over 40 years that disaster was coming if they didn't change. They ignored him. They mocked him. They threw him in a muddy cistern and left him to die. He was rescued, but then dragged to Egypt against his will when Jerusalem fell. In Egypt, he kept preaching. He told the Jewish exiles there to stop worshiping Egyptian idols. They'd had enough. According to historical tradition, the Jewish community in Egypt stoned Jeremiah to death. The prophet who spent his entire life crying over his people was killed by his own people, in a foreign country he never wanted to be in. Prophet 3, Ezekiel. He was a priest turned prophet, taken captive to Babylon. He had some of the most extraordinary visions in the entire Bible. The valley of dry bones, the wheel within a wheel, the 4 living creatures. He used those visions to keep the hope of Israel alive while they were slaves in a foreign land. But when Ezekiel confronted the leaders of his own community in Babylon, called the elders of Israel, for secretly worshiping idols while pretending to follow God, they turned on him. Ancient accounts say Ezekiel was killed by a leader of his own people, whom he had publicly rebuked. He died in exile, killed in Babylon, by an Israelite, for telling the truth. He never went home. Prophet 4, John the Baptist. Jesus himself called him the greatest man ever born. John's entire purpose was to announce the arrival of Jesus, prepare the way of the Lord. He did that loudly and fearlessly, including when he publicly called out King Herod for stealing his brother's wife, Herodias. Herod threw John in prison. At Herod's birthday banquet, Herodias' daughter danced so beautifully that Herod promised her anything she wanted, up to half his kingdom. The girl went to her mother. Her mother said one thing, the head of John the Baptist, on a plate. Herod didn't want to do it, but he had made his promise in front of everyone. John the Baptist was beheaded in prison. His head was brought out on a plate and given to a teenage girl. The greatest prophet who ever lived, killed at a birthday party over a dance. Prophet 5, Zechariah, son of the priest Jehoiada, who had literally saved the kingdom. Zechariah's own father had rescued King Joash from assassination when he was just a baby and raised him as his own. Jehoiada served the king faithfully for decades. When Jehoiada died, King Joash immediately abandoned God and started worshiping idols again. God sent Zechariah to warn him. Joash's response? He had Zechariah stoned to death in the temple courtyard, the same temple his father had died protecting. As Zechariah died, his last words were, "May the Lord see this and avenge it." Jesus referenced this exact moment in Matthew 23, calling it the last great act of injustice in all of Israel's history. Killed by the king his father had saved, in God's own house. His dying words became a prophecy. Prophet 6, Elijah. Now here's where this list takes a completely different turn. Elijah was perhaps the most powerful prophet who ever lived. He called down fire from heaven. He raised the dead. He outran a chariot on foot for miles. Queen Jezebel put a price on his head and he ran into the desert and asked God to let him die. And yet, Elijah never died. God sent a chariot of fire pulled by horses of fire that came down from the sky, and Elijah stepped onto it. His apprentice Elisha watched him rise up and disappear into the heavens in a whirlwind. To this day, Jewish tradition says, Elijah will return before the end of days. He is the only prophet on this list, and one of only 2 people in all of human history who left this earth without dying. The man Jezebel tried to kill is still technically alive. Prophet 7 Elisha, the apprentice of Elijah. the man who watched his master rise into the sky and then picked up his cloak and carried on. Elisha performed twice as many miracles as Elijah. He healed a leper. He made an axe head float. He raised a child from the dead. He fed 100 men with 20 loaves of bread. And when Elisha himself became ill and was dying, the king of Israel came to his bedside weeping, calling him the chariots and horsemen of Israel, meaning Elisha was worth more than an entire army. Elisha died of natural causes. But here is the wildest part. After his burial, some Israelites were burying another man and spotted enemy raiders coming. In a panic, they threw the body into Elisha's tomb. The moment the dead man's body touched Elisha's bones, he came back to life and stood up. Even dead, Elisha performed one final miracle. Prophet 8, Daniel. Taken to Babylon as a teenager, he rose to become one of the most powerful officials in the entire Babylonian Empire, and then the Persian Empire after that. He interpreted dreams that no one else could. He saw visions of the end of the world. His enemies, jealous of his power, convinced the Persian king to make praying to God illegal, specifically to trap Daniel. Daniel prayed anyway, 3 times a day, by his open window. He was thrown into a den of lions. The king himself couldn't sleep that night. In the morning he ran to the den and called out, and Daniel answered. The lions hadn't touched him. His accusers were thrown in immediately after. They didn't last as long as Daniel did. Daniel died peacefully of old age in Babylon, one of the very few prophets on this list who did. Prophet 9, Micah. He came from a small village and delivered one of the most specific prophecies in the entire Bible, that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Matthew 2 quotes it directly when the wise men ask where Jesus would be born. Micah's ministry was spent denouncing corrupt kings and corrupt priests, people who said they served God while exploiting the poor. He eventually ran out of kings willing to tolerate him. According to ancient records, Micah was killed by Joram, the son of the infamous king Ahab who had made Israel bow to Baal. He preached against the son, just as Elijah had preached against the father. And like his father, Joram silenced the prophet. Micah was killed for the same message he had preached his entire life, that God sees how the powerful treat the powerless. Prophet 10, Habakkuk. He is one of the most unusual prophets in the Bible, because instead of just delivering God's messages to people, he argued with God directly. His entire book is basically a conversation where Habakkuk asks, God, why do you allow evil to win? Why do the wicked prosper? And God answers. That kind of raw, honest wrestling with God made his writing deeply personal and deeply uncomfortable for the religious establishment. He also prophesied that the Messiah would come and transform everything the Jews held sacred, their laws, their temple, their entire system. The religious leaders did not appreciate that. According to ancient accounts, Habakkuk was stoned to death in Jerusalem by the very people his prophecies were meant to save. He asked God why evil wins. He died at the hands of evil. The answer came later, just not for him.